Jesus ate with people. So today we're going to be looking at a rather famous passage. It's so famous that children's ministries have actually made a song about it. You know, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. Do you know that song? Oh, all the children's workers are all doing hand motions. Yeah, I gotcha. All right. Yes, we're going to be looking at Zacchaeus today, and if you don't know who Zacchaeus is, welcome to the church. We're going to tell you all about him, and so we're going to be looking at this, at what Jesus experiences with Jesus. I've titled today's message, How to Find a Dinner Host, but it's really about how to become a dinner host in 4 easy steps. And so we're just going to have some fun with this today, but we're also going to be really serious about what it is that Jesus brings to Zacchaeus and how Zacchaeus finds Jesus. And hopefully we can draw some applications out of that for our own lives. Well, let's get into this story. Let's just pick up where Zacchaeus enters the story, and then we'll move forward from there. He, Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. Now, in the Roman colonies, not just the ones where the Jews lived, but in all of the Roman colonies, tax collectors were despised. Right? Across the board, they were despised. The reasons are pretty easy for us to spot. They charged exorbitant amounts of money, way over what the imperial government was asking them to charge. You see, how it works is, the tax collectors were not paid employees of the government. They were contract employees. And the contract read thusly: I expect you to go out and collect this amount of taxes from this region. And that's the minimum of what you have to do. Whatever you collect above and beyond that, that's yours to keep. That's how the Roman government worked it, so that they could incent tax collectors to come in and be tax collectors. Who else would want to be a tax collector? And so they would incent them that way. There was no upper limit to how much they could tax. And so some tax collectors taxed exorbitant amounts of money. And they would get support for this practice from the Roman military, who they would bribe with these funds that they were collecting as taxes. And so in return for these bribes, the Roman military would act as muscle for this extortion scheme, because that's what it was. It was extortion. And they didn't care. The Roman soldiers didn't care how much was charged as long as they got their cut. What difference does it make to them? So everyone despised the tax collectors because they were extortionists. In our passage, we have Zacchaeus, whom Luke calls the chief tax collector, which means he's likely responsible for other tax collectors, and took his cut from their cut. This is like Don Corleone, right? He's the godfather of the tax collectors, and he was rich. That's what Luke says right there in verse 2. From the world's perspective, then, he had everything that the world says you could want. He was rich. But very early on in this passage, we get this slight inkling that he's missing something, and he appears to know it. Our passage says he wants to see this Jesus. He probably doesn't even know why, but he wants to. So let's look at, how do you find what you're looking for? That's really what this passage is all about to begin with. First step in this process, you have to get over the crowd. Notice the main thing that's keeping Zacchaeus from seeing Jesus is the crowd. That's right, the crowd is what's keeping Jesus. Now, it's his height that's the physical issue. He's too short to see over the crowd, but this crowd is not just taller than him, they're also nasty and self-righteous and moralistic in the way they approach Zacchaeus. Look at verse 7. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. He's gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. You can hear the sneer in the voices, can't you? The people in this crowd look down at Zacchaeus and they say, "You sinner, you collaborator with the Romans, you extortionist." Let's be real. Many people around us today can't get over the crowd. Many people see the problem of a moralistic, self-righteous, religious people as too big a problem to overcome. That's it. These people are so judgmental, I don't even want to see Jesus anymore. Have you ever heard that? Maybe not voiced that way, but somewhat said that way. Now, I'm not going to excuse the self-righteous, judgy people of the world. I just went through a series on James in which I gave you 2 different messages on the problem of judgmentalism. But these people, these judgmental, self-righteous people, do exist. We know they do. We might even be one of them sometimes, if the right issue comes up, right? There are so many people in this world like the people in this account, people who look down on everyone else, who don't have their beliefs or their practices, and they're going to make sure that you know it. You aren't as good as me. I got shouted at this week for practicing Sabbath on a Sunday. You did what? You practice Sabbath on a Sunday? Good luck finding God. And many people have just given up on Christianity because of people like this, haven't they? They can't get past the crowd, and that's Zacchaeus' actual problem. He was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not. How often does the crowd keep us from seeing who Jesus is? On account of the crowd, this man couldn't see Jesus. That's the presentation of the problem for Luke. Jesus is in there somewhere, but I don't see him because the crowd is in the way, and all I see is the crowd. And of course, this crowd certainly isn't going to let a tax collector get any closer. So what's he to do? How do you find Jesus in spite of the crowd? Well, here's the issue. You do have to find Jesus in spite of the crowd. It does us no good to say, well, because of the crowd, I just decided not to accept Jesus. Because of the crowd, I've just decided I don't care who Jesus is. It's not going to fly. You still have to struggle with the crowd. You got to get over this. You got to find Jesus because there's no other way for you to survive anything. On Judgment Day, the crowd isn't going to be a reasonable excuse for why you didn't choose Jesus any more than you telling, I don't know, a magistrate the reason why you got a ticket is because the police officer was in the wrong place. Blaming the crowd just isn't going to work. Oh, those nasty, judgmental people, they kept me from you. No. But many people I have met have this attitude. I don't like these people, therefore Jesus must not be among them. But you have to get over the crowd. And that's what Zacchaeus does. Verse 4, so he ran on ahead, he climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him. You see, Zacchaeus didn't let people be a barrier between himself and Jesus. He found a way to see Jesus in spite of the crowd. He found a vantage point by which he could see over the crowd and see past the crowd to look at Jesus himself. You see, nobody is going to help you get over the crowd that's in your way. Nobody is. You have to do what what Zacchaeus did. You have to decide to say, I am going to find out who Jesus really is. And I'm not going to be affected by all the inconsistencies of the people who say that they're his followers. I'm going to see who Jesus really is. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to focus on the things that really matter. But here's the deal. He's not physically in front of us, is he? So how do you see Jesus today? Well, you have to go right to the text. Others tell you who Jesus is, and go discover him for yourself in the Word of God, where he's presented to us. Read those words yourself. You have to go right to the passages and see what he's really like. See what he really said. That's how you find Jesus. Are you willing to discipline yourself to pick up the book? Because look, The Chosen is just another crowd interpretation, right? I mean, it might be good, but I won't know whether or not it is good unless I know the text, unless I know Jesus as he presents himself in the text. That's the only way whether or not I'm going to be able to discern. I'll give you a clue here. When you get into the text, you're going to find some things about Jesus that maybe surprise you. Like, for instance, Jesus Christ was as turned off by religious people as you and I are. Maybe more so. And that's when you realize that Jesus isn't looking for a crowd, he's looking for you and me.